Welcome to the latest podcast then. Rob Staton and Robbie Williams with you. And we've got a lot to get into. This was going to be solely a preview podcast for the Arizona Cardinals game of the weekend. But some big breaking news in the last hour or so is that the Seahawks appear to be very much interested in signing Antonio Brown, who is a free agent receiver. He's been serving a suspension, which ends in a couple of weeks' time, and then he will be eligible to sign for a team and to start performing in the NFL straight away. And it appears that the Seahawks, who've been linked with Antonio Brown for some time, you remember during the summer, Russell Wilson and Antonio Brown worked out together. Wilson appears to have gone to bat for Brown on a number of occasions and appears to be very interested in seeing him join his arsenal of weapons here in Seattle. And look, Pete Carroll's already been asked about it today, and he says they're in every single move, including this one. He has not dismissed it. I've got a theory on why this news has come out today, Robbie, and I'm going to come to that in a second. But first of all, what is your raw reaction to this news that has just broken now of Antonio Brown potentially joining the Seahawks?
I like it. I mean, if they're not going to go out and fix the D-line, then you need to surround Russell with as many weapons as possible. And who knows what the deal is with Josh Gordon and why they haven't gotten him back. So, go out and get Antonio Brown. I mean, if it's just a one-year deal, just for this season, if he acts up and has any issues, and get him out the door. But yeah, I mean, absolutely go get the guy. I mean, he's a big time playmaker, and you throw him in, with DK and Lockett, and all of a sudden you've got a dangerous group of wide receivers that can do some damage. So I'm all for it if they're not going to go out and do anything on it to fix the D-line.
My theory on this, Robbie, is that I wonder if the Seahawks are very comfortable for this news to have broken today, because it's 2 weeks away from him being able to sign with anybody. I mean, technically the Seahawks could sign him tomorrow and then just activate him when he comes off the commissioner's exempt list in a couple of weeks' time. So they can sign him at any point, but they can't play him until, week 8 or after week 8, whatever it is. However, if you get that news out there now, then you can gauge reaction. So this is going to be a controversial move for a number of reasons. Antonio Brown has got a very checkered past, to say the least. He'd had issues with the law. There's been some very serious accusations levied his way and thrown at him. And a lot of people are not going to like this. And looking at some of the reaction, there's almost an excitement amongst some, an acceptance amongst others, and just a complete, a lot of people just are saying, no, I cannot accept this. I don't want this player in Seattle. So if you have the biggest name in NFL media, Adam Schefter, putting this story out there 2 weeks before he can even play for the Seahawks, you are going to get a very good grasp of what your fan base and what the NFL world thinks about you potentially signing Antonio Brown. Do you think there's anything in? I mean, it just seems valid to me, Robbie, that if nothing else, if you are the Seahawks, it's worth seeing what people think about this. And the report is the Seahawks are on the cards to sign him, but nothing's confirmed yet, nothing's concrete yet. There are other teams interested as well. But the Seahawks are on, I'm going to try and find the exact wording that Schefter uses. With Antonio Brown's suspension eligible to end after week 8, the Seahawks are positioned to make a push to sign him. Positioned to make a push to sign him. Not they're sort of interested, they might do. It's their position to make a push to sign him. That to me is fans, what do you think about this? If we get the kind of reaction that we are hoping for, we're going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I like that theory a lot, actually. And you have to think back and think about how burnt we got by Percy Harvin and the kind of distraction he was for this team. And I can see why fans don't want Antonio Brown. There's a lot of off-field issues, and you don't want a guy on the team like that who's going to come in and disrupt the locker room. Look, we're 5-0 right now. I mean, the receivers, DK, Lockett, they're all playing really well right now. David Moore's playing great. Freddie Swain is, seems to be up and coming. So you've got players, and you've got players coming back like Gordon, and if Philip Dorsett comes back, like you've got options. So you don't have to bring Antonio Brown in. So I can see why people don't want him. But on the flip side, those guys aren't Antonio Brown. when he's on the football field, he is one of the best football players in the league. So you get a player like that, you pair him up with DK, you pair him up with Lockett, and clearly Russ likes him. Put it on Russ's shoulders. Make him be responsible for keeping Antonio in check. Let's see what happens.
The Kansas City Chiefs have done absolutely anything they can, Robbie, over the last couple of years to support Patrick Mahomes. They have signed, a number of players. They've gone out and spent huge money on Sammy Watkins. They recently brought in Le'Veon Bell. They offered massive extensions to Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, who's had his own issues off the field. They've spent high draft picks on Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a first-round pick. Mecole Hardman was a second-round pick. The Chiefs' mentality seems to be, we cannot do enough to support Patrick Mahomes. Now, they've also been able to provide a complementary defense by going out being very aggressive to trade for Frank Clark. They hit on Chris Jones, and then they went out and signed Tyrann Mathieu. So they kind of have a team, they won the Super Bowl last year. We know they have a team that is well-rounded, that is balanced, that can go and give anybody a game. And you'd expect that they're going to be, if they're not in the AFC Championship again this year or the Super Bowl, it will be a surprise to many. You expect them to get at least to the AFC Championship, maybe even win the Super Bowl again and defend their title. The Seahawks seem to be taking a similar approach. And you made a good point earlier. If we can sit here and we can say the Seahawks should trade for Ryan Kerrigan, or the Seahawks should trade for Tack McKinley, or they should go and sign somebody else. Everybody wants them to go and trade for JJ Watt, which is just, it seems really, he's the mayor of Houston. He practically runs the place. He's practically the owner. It's not the McNair son. It's JJ Watt. I mean, he is so important to that franchise. I just don't see them, if they're going to trade anybody, I don't see it being JJ Watt. And I think if he does move, it will be very, very expensive. They're not going to give him away. There'll be a huge queue of teams trying to sign him as well. So if you are not able to go out and sign anybody who is going to tilt things in your favor, then you have to see what else you can do. And if you are going to need 30 to 40 points a game to win games, if you are going to need scoreboard pressure in order to help your defense, to put it on other teams to chase games, to put it on other teams to come after you, to make teams not be able to do what the Minnesota Vikings did, which was just run it down your throat to the tune of 201 yards. The Seahawks want teams to throw. They think that they are quite comfortable, even if they give up 400 yards passing, that as long as no one's running the ball on them, they will be okay. And look, Antonio Brown will help them to do that. Whatever your opinions are of him as a man, and we could sit here and do a whole podcast on all of the issues that he's been through, Robbie. And if you said, I don't want him anywhere near this team, no one could turn around and say, you are wrong for thinking that. That is a perfectly valid point to have. However, from strictly the football perspective, if you need to outscore opponents, if you need to be scoring, like I say, 30 to 40 points, if you put him on the field with DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, and Greg Olsen, and Will Disley, and Chris Carson's great with his hands. He's also a fantastic running back. You're going to have Rashad Penny back hopefully soon in a few weeks' time. You've got an assortment of weapons there that are as good as anything in the NFL. Are they as good as the Chiefs? Maybe so. You can make an argument that they've got the speed that the Chiefs have, that they've got the tight end, maybe not as good as Travis Kelce, but they have tight ends. You could argue that their number two, whether it's Sammy Watkins or Mecole Hardman, isn't as good as Seattle's, whether that's you classify DK or Tyler as the number two. Certainly the number three isn't as good as Antonio Brown. So you're making a case there for saying no one's got weapons like us. And one quick other final point that I'd like your thoughts on here, Robbie. What have we heard this season? We've heard Mike Florio reporting that Russell Wilson went to the Seahawks and said, you let me cook or we're going to have an issue. And it was clear that that came from Mark Rodgers, Russell Wilson's agent, who has done interviews with Mike Florio in the past. Florio has got his finger on the pulse for the agents. It was pretty clear who Florio's source was. Now, I don't know that for sure. You can make that connection. 2 + 2 = 4 in this instance. You've got Wilson saying, we need superstars in the offseason. You've got Wilson allowing Antonio Brown to publicly make it very aware that you're working out together and that you want him to sign. You've got people like John Clayton saying Wilson's well on board with Antonio Brown signing. If he's going to do all these things and sort of offer up these kind of ultimatums of we either let me cook or else kind of thing, which is what Mark Rodgers was allegedly Mark Rodgers was implying, then this is a chance for the Seahawks to call his bluff a little bit and go, well, go on then. You have your guy. You make it work. this is on you. You've got to keep him in control. You've got to make sure that he isn't doing anything daft off the field. You've got to make sure that he's in check. And if it doesn't work out, you're going to go up to him and you're going to tell him that he's cut. This is on you. And they give Wilson what he wants, which is Antonio Brown on this offense. And they return that tennis ball to his side of the court. And that could give them a huge advantage going forward if Wilson ever turns around to Caroline Schneider again and makes any further ultimatums. We've got you, Antonio Brown. Now it's up to you to make it work.
That's a great idea, right? I mean, as a team, that makes sense. If you want to go do that, give him what he wants. If it doesn't work, put it back on him to do that. And, and then this is probably why the Seahawks are in position to sign Antonio Brown, because they probably have known this for 8 weeks. We're going to go out and sign Antonio Brown as soon as he becomes available. Like, maybe this is their plan all along. And maybe they've been telling Russ, hey, we're going to go get you him as soon as the time comes available. And, the NFL is a copycat league. So like kind of what you're saying, like we're probably copying kind of the Chiefs formula for winning a Super Bowl. And, we went out and got our stud, defensive player in Jamal Adams, like they got a couple of theirs. And now we're going to go out and allegedly try to sign Antonio Brown, give Russ as much as he can to an arsenal that he can work with, give ourselves a legit shot to win a Super Bowl.
The other thing is they clearly felt like they needed another weapon because they signed Josh Gordon. He's not eligible to rejoin the team. They signed Philip Dorsett. Going into the draft, I remember writing a lot about, Brandon Ayuk, who ended up with the 49ers, or Jalen Reagor, who went to the Eagles, or Chase Claypool, who's tearing it up with the Steelers at the minute. We kind of felt, I think it's fair to say that Seahawks fans felt like another receiver wasn't such a bad thing. If you could get one more dynamic weapon on this offense, that would be really good. So if Josh Gordon can't play, and if Philip Dorsett's been injured, but Antonio Brown's available in a couple of weeks' time, he's your guy. You say, unfortunately, Josh, we may come back to this later, but Philip Dorsett, if you can't get healthy, then again we're going to move on. And they've got room on the roster. They're carrying Penny Hart, who doesn't really do that much. They're carrying Luke Wilson, who doesn't even take any snaps. Jacob Hollister, I think, has had no targets in the last 2 games. They're carrying players on the roster that aren't contributing. They might as well have someone active who can actually contribute in the form of Antonio Brown. So that one, to me, seems like they're gauging interest, and we'll see where it goes in the next 2 weeks. But very interesting news today regarding Antonio Brown and the Seahawks. Right, let's talk a bit about this game coming up then, Robbie, Arizona. Now, first of all, Pete Carroll has done a press conference today, and he has mentioned that Jamal Adams is not practicing today, or that he is, maybe it's touch and go whether he is going to play this weekend. How concerned are you with that news? Is it signs that maybe this is a more serious injury than we thought? Or is it a case of the Seahawks being especially careful? Because really what you want is Jamal Adams for the most games possible this year, not just to have him for the sake of having him against Arizona. Because if he plays against the Cardinals and he's not right, you could lose him for the rest of the year. If he plays in 2 or 3 weeks' time and you get him for the rest of the year, that is the important thing. But the other side of it, Robbie, is there is always a lot more pressure on you when you've traded 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and a player for Jamal Adams. That is a huge cost, and you need as many games as possible in return for that. You can't be playing sort of 6-7 games a year. You need him to be playing, as close to 16 as possible.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a combination of everything, right? It's probably a little bit of cat and mouse as well. Like if he's healthy enough to play, maybe they're letting him rest a little bit this week and just to kind of get him ready for game time, and then, make the Cardinals think, do we have to game plan for him? Do we not have to game plan for him? You don't want to, tip your hand too early. So it could be something like that, or it could be, maybe the injury is just a little bit worse than we thought and he needs another week. I don't know. But at this point, it's too early to tell this early in the week. I wouldn't really know. We'll see by Friday, how he's looking and, if he's traveling with the team or not.
I think it's just disappointing more than anything. What you really want this week is Pete Carroll to say he's fully healed. The bye was perfect timing. He's ready to roll, and he's just out there. I think everybody wants to see him out there for numerous reasons. One, he's a talented player. 2, the Seahawks have spent all this much on him. You need him out there, and you want to see him sort of fit into this thing. It's a new team, it's a new scheme. He needs to sort of develop into a role here. So he seems like he's not going to play in this game. What do you make of the Arizona Cardinals. So they started with that fantastic win in San Francisco when San Francisco actually had all of their players available, the Bosa's and Garoppolo was healthy and everybody. They go 2-0. They then lose to the Lions and the Panthers, but then, seem to right the ship the following week. And then, that was practically a bye week for them against Dallas. I mean, they went through the motions. They didn't play particularly well in that game against Dallas, but, I kind of fancy myself to chalk out a win for the Cardinals at quarterback against what was quite frankly a pathetic effort from Dallas, and you look at Andy Dalton in the first sort of few snaps and it's all going, and he's kind of laughing and he's trying to look relaxed out there, but he must have been dying inside. I mean, he had to do better than that. And Dallas just looked like an absolute clown show at the moment. So it's hard to sort of read much from that game, but Kyler Murray's talented. Hopkins always seems to play well against the Seahawks, especially when they played Houston a few years ago. No Chandler Jones. Larry Fitz always seems to have an impact somehow against Seattle. What do you make of them?
Yeah, I didn't like seeing that they got the running game going. I was kind of hoping that would kind of die off. I mean, Kenyon Drake killed us last year. He had over 200 yards rushing. So, and they got him going anyway. He ran for 160. But yeah, you're right. I mean, against Dallas, they didn't really play particularly well. I mean, Kyler Murray was 9 for 24. He didn't even complete 10 passes. And so he just looked off. But man, that guy is super fast. So when he took off with his legs, that's where it's going to be dangerous for us. We're going to have a spy on him. We're going to have somebody, making sure that he's not going to just take off and beat us with his legs, because he can pick up a quick 16 yards on 3rd and long really fast with his legs if you give him too much space. So yeah, I mean, you got to cover that guy. And, I don't know how you really stop DeAndre Hopkins. You don't. You just hope to contain him a little bit. I mean, that guy's an animal. So, I think really it's going to come down to stopping Kenyon Drake and making sure they don't get that running game going, and then make sure that you don't get Kyler Murray taken off with his legs.
I don't really know what to think of the Cardinals, Robbie, because, it's very easy to think of the game at the end of last year, but it's also easy to forget that Seattle were going through a major injury crisis at that point. With Jadeveon Clowney got the sports hernia. Dwayne Brown, I think, he either didn't play in that game or he left that game. Chris Carson got hurt in that game. Rashad Penny was already out for the year. Travis Homer was running the ball. They teed off on Russell Wilson and he had no chance. And they couldn't do a thing on offense. Kyler Murray then got injured, and then they bring in the backup quarterback Brett Hundley, and he just did his best Kyler Murray impression, which kind of made me think that the Seahawks were just so battered, bruised, and in turmoil by that point that practically anybody could have quarterbacked a victory against Seattle that day, and that really you couldn't read too much into either Murray's performance when he was healthy or the overall game, because it was just a really strange day. It was just one of those games where I remember thinking afterwards, that's the season, it doesn't matter now. The Seahawks haven't played particularly well throughout the whole year, but you kind of still thought, well, if they get the number 1 seed in the NFC or if they win the NFC West, you just never know. And after that game, it just felt like there was this crushing disappointment of everybody's hurt, everybody's injured. They can't play that way. They brought Marshawn Lynch back, and that was the pick-me-up I think everybody needed. I mean, it's a really emotional moment when, Marshawn did the videos like, why Seattle? It's like, well, unfinished business. And it was like, it just lifted everybody again, and it got everybody, the Seahawks are very good at that, getting everybody's hopes up again. But they needed that because it just felt such a crushing game. And then it's easy to forget that early in the season, when Seattle went to Arizona, that was the only comfortable win they had in the whole of 2019. It was never in doubt. I mean, it was just from minute one, as soon as Clowney ran in that pick 6, it was, this is going to be a win for the Seahawks. It was their only really comfortable win in the whole season. So hard to know what to make of them. And one thing Chris Sims made a very good point after on NBC after the Dallas game when he was speaking to Mike Florio on PFT this week, which was that he's been watching the mechanics of Kyler Murray, and he says that they're very different than they've been before, and he's sort of studying it, and he's a bit of a self-confessed quarterback geek. He was saying that he thinks he's throwing like he has a bit of tendonitis or something, some kind of issue in his arm, because he says the release is long-winded, it's really slow, he's side-arming a lot of stuff. He felt, he even noticed, he said, this is how sad that I am. He says, I'm noticing he's undoing his chin strap with his left hand every time and sort of almost hanging his right arm down by his side. And that And he just says, that's peculiar. That's not, if you're right-handed, you just naturally do that. And he's taking his chin strap over his left and he's hanging his right arm. So he felt like there may be some kind of, just enough of an injury bothering him there. I mean, I'm saying this, it'll be a 450-yard passing game now on Sunday, and I've said this. But if that is the case, then it's something that is worth considering as well. And then, it really comes down to, can you stop the run? Can you stop Kenyon Drake? Can you stop him running for 100 yards? And Kyler Murray, that is. Because if you do, and if his throwing motion is difficult, then that's sort of more conservative. Take what he's given, make sure that you take away the running lanes, spy him a little bit, have someone spying him, but you sit back and take what he's given. If he's struggling to throw it and he can't run anywhere, that could play into Seattle's advantage.
Yeah, I saw, during the game, they ran a little running back wheel route out, and he overthrew the running back by over his head by like 4 yards, and he threw it what it looked like a baseball throw. To be honest, it didn't look like he was setting in the pocket and throwing like a quarterback. So, I mean, it's very possible. I'm no professed quarterback guru, so I don't know anything about that, but I'll take him for his word, and if he's seeing that, I mean, that's definitely something to look at. But again, you can't, he's still playing. So if it was a serious injury, he would not be out there. So I'm not going to read too much into it. I mean, the game before that, he threw for 380 yards against the Jets. So you never know. He could easily.
The Jets.
I know it's still the Jets, right? But I mean, they could he could still come out and do the same thing. So yeah, I mean, for me, again, it comes down to just stopping that. And then, I look at how we go against them, with our offense against our defense. And I feel like this is going to be a good game for Russ. I don't really think their defense is, all that cracked up, and I just not super impressed by their defense. And I know they played Dallas and whatnot, but man, it just don't feel like Zeke just didn't even, like I've said this when he played the Seahawks, I don't even feel like Zeke is I don't even know where he's at right now. It doesn't even look like the same running back. So, and I mean, he dropped the football a couple times, and he just doesn't look like he has the passion for the game. Like, he's got paid, now he's done. Like, that's kind of what it looks like. And I just don't see them being able to stop Chris Carson, Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf. Like, I just don't see this being a game where they're going to be able to stop us. This is going to be probably another high scoring game. It's going to be one of those games where we're like, how did they get 450 yards on us again? But, I think it's going to be close. And but Russell Wilson, he's only lost one time in Arizona. And so you look at that and you think, man, that was his rookie year, and that's a game they should have won as well. So I feel good about it. Like, I feel like this is the first time we've been 5-0 ever, and this is a game I feel like we could go 6-0.
I hate to be a pedant on this, but I've been hearing this Wilson's only lost once in Arizona thing all week, and every time I've heard it, I've just thought he's lost twice in Arizona, unfortunately.
Really?
The Super Bowl.
Oh, come on. That's messed up.
Do you know what? To his credit, that has not been a lingering issue when he's visited that stadium, because that is the house of horrors when it. I mean, as good as Seattle's record is in that stadium, that Super Bowl, and the fact that Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman's Seahawks careers were ended there, and Earl Thomas's, actually, for that matter, a year later, or it was a year later, wasn't it? So, it's not a place that when they pull up to that stadium, it just must send a shiver down a few spines as they're on the bus. I could have done
without that, Rob. I could have done without
Sorry.
that, man.
Do you know what? That memory of that will never leave us until they win another one, which is why they've got to try and do that ASAP. I mean, just to look at the defense thing for the Arizona Cardinals, clearly it's better. Chandler Jones is another player who always seems to play well against Seattle, and he's had more sacks. I saw that stat. I think since Aaron Donald was drafted, sort of that kind of range, he's had the most sacks in the NFL, more than Donald, more than anybody, any of these other prolific, the Watts, people like that, who've had fantastic sack seasons. So him not being there is a huge blow for Arizona. But one thing that the Cardinals do, Robbie, which frightens me, and it's they aggressively blitz very well. And we saw that in the game last year in Seattle. But there are some teams that do it, and Pittsburgh are another one of these teams where the quarterback lines up and you just see this wall of players on the line, and you just think, oh, crap. You just think how, and when there's just so many of them there, and you just know they're bringing heat. And the things that some of these teams who blitz well, they have the different looks. So they'll show that maybe like 7 or 8 are coming, 2 will drop, but then next time it'll be completely different. And they're just creative. The Ravens do it when they're at their best. You know, Wink Martindale will very creative blitzers, give you an awful lot of looks. And there's just something about that, and as a quarterback, it must be quite intimidating. And it's something that Wilson's never really, that when the pressure is coming, and we all know the pressure's coming, Wilson hasn't always been, he's not that sort of quick set throw quarterback. And we saw that against the Vikings. When they were bringing pressure, it was getting to him. He was sitting in the pocket. He was trying to create, but the lanes weren't there for throwing or to run and scramble. And that's one of the reasons why I had a difficult day against the Vikings. Now, look, there are other teams. Kyle Shanahan's very good at this. Jimmy Garoppolo can drop, set, turn, fire, and they get it out of his hands very quickly. Wilson and the Seahawks have never been that type of team, and the Cardinals will throw people up at the line, Robbie, and they'll bring the heat, and he's got to find a way to get it out quickly. And this is the kind of game where, you know, those hot routes, if there's one area in Seattle's offense that I'd like to see them be a little bit better, it's that we know the pressure's coming. Who am I getting this ball out to? Who is getting this? And have we got an audible of something that when we see heavy pressure, we can check it down. We can get out of this play so that we can just get the yardage we need in order to move the chains or get a better second down or get a better third down or whatever it is. Because it's just one of those areas where Seattle struggle. And when the Seahawks blitz, it kind of always tends to be just one extra guy comes. Bobby Wagner will go, or Ryan Neal, or Jamal Adams. It never seems particularly threatening. It never looks like it's going to get home. And then you see these other teams sort of flying in there. So I'd like to see the Seahawks address that a little bit more coming up in this game. Buda Baker, I wanted to talk about him. Now, you told me before we started that you are a Huskies fan. Personally, I do not have a college allegiance at all. I have been to see the Huskies play on multiple occasions, but for the sake of a draft blog, I don't like to have a team. I like to be very neutral, not be accused of any bias there. What did you think of Buda Baker coming into the NFL?
Stud. I knew it was going to be a stud, and I wanted the Seahawks to draft him really bad. Like he's one of the guys that, at the time I look back and I think, man, why, you see all these things. Well, they traded down, they passed on him, and they drafted whoever, and Malik McDowell or whoever it was. And, you look at it and you're just like, man, why didn't they do that? But if at the time you look at the safety position that we had and you think, okay, I can see why they didn't, and who knows what exactly they were thinking. And, you didn't want to cause any more turmoil, necessarily maybe with Earl or whatever the case might be. And I think they probably just were not going that route. I mean, for me, you got to draft the best player available. And in my mind, he was. And so, you watched him against Dallas, he just looked awesome. And he's just a really good football player. And I wish he didn't play for Arizona.
Pete Carroll was asked about Buda Baker today, and he was asked, what did you think of him coming out and stuff like that? And Carroll showed that he's not afraid to just talk, rubbish to get out of a question when needs be. He said something like, we wanted to draft him, we were quite keen on him, but we couldn't just make it happen. Now, nobody expected Buda Baker to drop, into the range where Seattle were picking with their second pick. So it was always going to be, they had to take him the first pick or not. And I think it's pretty clear. I remember writing after the Atlanta playoff game in 2016 that Seattle's biggest need was interior pass rush. Going into that 2017 season, they still had Cam Chancellor. They were not to know that he was going to end up having to retire in a few months' time. They still had Earl Thomas. Who knows where Earl Thomas was at that point? I mean, was it a sudden and abrupt disconnect between team and Thomas, or at that point was the relationship as it had been for the previous sort of 4, 5, 6 years or whatever? Safety might not necessarily have been the biggest need, but I do have an issue with this draft in totality, Robbie, because I said that I thought they needed an interior pass rusher more than anything, and I think they targeted Malik McDowell thinking, this is the guy, this is what we're missing. This is the kind of player that is our biggest need. We would have been a top 10 pick. We never get to pick that early. He's fallen because of character. We're going to take a chance. I've got no issues with any of that. The fact that it didn't work out means it's a very easy stick to beat the Seahawks with. And I think it's too often used against the Seahawks that they went that. But then I look at this draft class and you look who they passed on and you look at some of the names and, TJ Watt. And I was rereading an article that I wrote about Watt and Tyus Bowser, who's obviously not had the same career as TJ Watt, happy to admit that. But I remember listing all of Khalil Mack's physical traits and comparing them to TJ Watt, and they were practically the same player physically. in terms of size, explosive, speed, quickness over 10 yards, agility. Everything was there. And when you watched him play, he looked like an absolute terror. And he's a Watt. And you know that his brother is, was NFL MVP twice around that time. So I don't know why the Seahawks, didn't give him more thought. Was it because he'd had a serious injury in his career? Was he because he was a bit of a one-year wonder at Wisconsin? Is it because they moved him from tight end to outside linebacker and they just didn't have that faith? Was it purely because they thought inside interior rush was the biggest need? Who knows? But they passed on TJ Watt. They passed on Ryan Ramczyk. I have to say, I wasn't the biggest Ryan Ramczyk fan. I thought short arms, injury issues, concerns there. The reason he fell was because I think of a back or a neck injury of some kind. Kevin King has ended up being a reasonably decent. He ticked a lot of boxes. I know they don't take cornerbacks early, but his height, his length, his agility, his speed, the complete package in that regard. A lot of people like Cam Robinson. I wasn't the biggest fan. A lot of people liked him. And then you got Budda Baker, who were all available to Seattle in that draft. And it's quite a list of names, isn't it, given where their careers have turned out, Robbie, to end up with a player who sadly never played a down for Seattle.
Well, and you start looking at it as terms of this year's draft, and is Darrell Taylor ever going to play for us? He's so injured, and that's what I'm saying. Draft, you don't draft for need all the time, and that's what I think they've made a couple of mistakes in starting to draft for need, and instead of just drafting the best player available, going with the best player available and making it fit in your system. I don't know why they didn't go after TJ Watt. There's a lot of reasons, like you just said, that could have been it. And Steelers blitz him way more than we probably would have ever. So I mean, that's probably one of the reasons. And they probably just didn't see that as being a big of a need, when you've got Bobby and KJ already. I don't really know what the thought process there was. And I mean, but I'm sure you can go in every single draft and look back and be like, oh, look at these players that they didn't draft and they drafted someone instead, and you can be super frustrated. So yeah, I tend to try to avoid that, because now I just get really pissed off.
The thing is, I think the way I would look at it is, if you can look at, let's say, 6 drafts, you sort of lay out 6 drafts. And if in half of those drafts you say, I wish they'd have drafted somebody else, but in the other half you go, no, they made the right call there, they made the right decision, then I can kind of sit with that. And I can say, look, the draft is what it is. You're never going to hit every single year. Very few. You have to be very lucky to do that. You've just got to try and do your best and hit as often as possible. If you get a kind of a 50% in the first 2 rounds over 6 years, you're doing something right. I think the problem is, Robbie, is that consistently you kind of look at the players that they passed on. So the following year, they had the number 18 pick. They were always going to trade down that year. I know people sort of constantly go, oh, Derwin James just 1 pick away. It's like, if he'd have lasted to 18, I think the Seahawks still would have moved down. They had like 1 pick and then didn't pick again until the 4th round. And I think they had 4 picks. They were always going to have to trade down and try and get more stock in that draft. But they traded down quite substantially from 18 all the way down to 27. And then you look at the players that they ended up passing on. They've drafted a linebacker very early. Leighton Van Der Esch was there. They passed on Frank Ragnow, had a very good career as a center for Detroit. Isaiah Wynn, I really liked Isaiah Wynn coming out of the draft, and has been a really good pick for New England now that he's healthy. DJ Moore looks good in Carolina. Calvin Ridley looks good in Atlanta. And then you get to Rashad Penny, and then you sort of look further down the list and you see players, other running backs even. Nick Chubb has looked very good for Cleveland. Ronald Jones has looked superb recently for Tampa Bay now that he's straightened things out. Again, if you're talking about linebackers, Darius Leonard was in number 36 overall and drafted by the Colts, and has gone on to have a really good career. So you kind of think again, was Rashad Penny the right player in that circumstance? And then, in 2019, we could do a whole hour on the 2019 draft. I mean, look, the way that they traded Clark and then fudged, I think expecting to get Rashawn Gary or Brian Burns. And if not, Jonathan Abram will be there. And, oh, look, you've missed out on all 3. And now you're panicking and you've ended up drafting, another, the pass rusher that's on top of your board just because in LJ Collier and Marquise Blair. And you kind of salvage it with DK Metcalf. For me, Robbie, there's kind of like a trend developing here. And I really hope that in a couple of years, we're not looking back and saying Darrell Taylor never played any significant plays for the Seahawks because of this injury. And who knows about Jordan Brooks, because I still don't think, look, they've signed Michael Kendricks today. What does that say about where they are at linebacker? Because why would Kendricks be on the practice squad if they had any kind of faith that Jordan Brooks was going to do anything this year, is he just a replacement for Cody Barton? And if he is, then you might as well just cut Cody Barton right now.
Yeah, I mean, Cody Barton shouldn't be playing. I'll just say that right now. I'm not a fan. And I said a couple of weeks ago that I thought they should re-sign him. I mean, Kendrick played well for us. I mean, he was asked to do a lot of things that we didn't, that we don't typically, do in our defense. And so, last year he had 3 sacks for us. Maybe he can bring some pressure off the edge from the outside linebacker position. Who knows? I mean, I think getting him in is a smart move. He's a proven player. He knows our system. Get him in. Let's see if he can help our football team. And we need as many defensive players as we can to help us, stop the run, stop the pass, make some plays, and he's a proven player. So I'm all for bringing him back. And again, like I said, if you start looking at the draft, you can start questioning a lot of these things and then drafting for need instead of just best player available and really going off their board and instead of just taking guys off because they're like, well, he doesn't fit because whatever the case might be, and you look at Nick Chubb and he had a significant injury too coming out. So I think, they probably were worried about that. So there's a lot of different things he can do. I mean, Penny unfortunately has been injured, but I think he has all the tools to be a good running back. It just, unfortunately he's been injured and you can't do anything about that, right? Those things just happen in the game. So yeah, it's unfortunate and it's tough looking back when, if we could go back and make all the right moves, maybe we would, but it's tough to say.
The 2 things with Penny and with LJ Collier is that they came in and a year after they sort of had their rookie years, both times Pete Carroll said, they didn't come in the best shape. They'd put on a bit of weight or something and they needed to get down. And you're thinking, what? Why is that happening? Why are they drafting players who maybe go in the first round unexpectedly? And then is that what it is? Is it that sort of, I didn't expect to be a first round pick. I am a millionaire. Let's go to, I doubt my fast food knowledge of America is limited. I must be honest. You still have McDonald's over there. Let's go to McDonald's. Well, a Big Mac. I don't know. It just seems strange, for a team that prioritizes grit and love of the game so much that back-to-back picks came in and they've said afterwards is not particularly in the best shape and they need to work on that. I like Michael Kendricks.
Yeah, but for every bad pick, you got to look at the good ones too. How good has DK Metcalf been for us? And, you look at it and you think this guy fell in the second round. I think other teams are kicking themselves like, oh man, we could have had DK Metcalf, but we traded down or we picked somebody else. And, you got to look at some of the good ones as well.
Yeah, DK Metcalf looks like if he looked at a Big Mac, it would just metabolize and he wouldn't add any weight. Quick thought, Michael Kendricks. I think that people sort of knock him and say, wasn't that great last year? Think of the role he was put in there. I mean, Pete Carroll would often say, he's our nickel. He ran a 4-4. And I think the role was poor for him. We're in base defense, but we can get away with it because we've got a 250-pound guy who runs a 4-4. Probably doesn't run a 4-4 anymore. His combine was 8 years ago. So, and he'd had injuries and he'd had a massive legal issue. So, and been out the game. So he probably doesn't run a 4-4. And you're asking him to sort of do that and cover, slot, tight end, stuff like that, and still rush the passer a little bit. I think it was too much on him. And if he comes back to play the will, which is what Pete Carroll has said today, then I think that's a much better role for him. Before we get on to predictions, quickly, trade deadline, still nothing there, Robbie. It's time to give up hope. Is it just going to be Antonio Brown? Is it? I kind of feel like hope is fading that they're going to do anything there.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I'm starting to lose a little bit of hope on that, and it's frustrating. But I mean, at the same time, if anything, it'd be a late round pick for somebody, and it's going to be someone that's going to come in and maybe can help a little bit. But I don't think it's going to be, it's not going to be this JJ Watt or whatever people keep saying. That's not going to happen. I mean, and I don't think we're giving up our second round pick. We're not. It's that we're going to use that second round pick to trade down to get more picks. And we gave up our first and the third for Jamal Adams. We don't have the draft capital to give up another pick, especially our second round. John Snyder's not going to go into the draft not getting to draft until the 4th round. It's just not happen. It won't happen. So I think people should just stop saying, give him the second for whoever. I just don't see it happening. I could be wrong, but I really just don't see that being the case. I have a hard time picturing John not wanting to have a pick in the first 3 rounds. So yeah, but I'm losing hope that something's going to happen. I mean, anybody, just bring someone in. I don't care now at this point. Just go get someone who, can help make an impact. I don't think we're going to get somebody that's going to be, putting up 10 sacks a year, but if someone can come in and provide a little bit of pressure off the edge, that would be what we need.
They need some speed off the edge. I mean, however they find it, they've got to find it. If Darrell Taylor's not coming back, and it doesn't sound like he is this season, then they've got to find somebody. Benson Mayowa can not be your only person on the entire roster who could theoretically play the Leo. You've got LJ Collier, Rasheem Green, Donontre Moore, Jonathan Bullard are all that kind of 5 technique, inside out type. And you've got one guy, Alton Robinson, I guess I'm forgetting him. You've got 2 guys there. One's a 5th round rookie and one's a journeyman rushing the edge. If just get somebody else to provide to get some reps, just to take some, to involve in the rotation, see if they can be your 3rd down rusher. I don't know. They need somebody there with a bit of speed and quickness who can get off the edge and win some 1v1s. So we'll see if that is still possible. There is still a bit of time, but as I mentioned, losing a bit of hope there. Before the predictions, this game starts an hour early in the UK because our clocks go back a week or 2 before yours do, which is always a welcome sign when I see the game that it says 8:05 p.m. as opposed to 9:05 p.m. I always kind of hope that the Seahawks play a late primetime game around this period of time, because then it starts at midnight as opposed to 1 o'clock in the morning over here, but not to be. And a quick story on that, obviously I have the Wembley games over here, and on one occasion, the Wembley game was during this period where our clocks go forward, yours don't. I think that's the way it is. We get an extra hour in bed. It's probably the other way around. I'm getting confused. But either way, the game kicked off at 5 instead of 6 over here. We went to watch the Broncos against the 49ers. I think both teams were winless at the time. A real treat for the fans in the UK. And I was with my brother and my wife, and we got on it. We'd stayed overnight in some hotel. We got the train. We were on the train to Wembley. It's about half an hour. And I suddenly looked in my phone and discovered that the game had kicked off because we'd completely forgotten about the difference in time, and that we missed the whole of the first quarter. We got to Wembley and we got there, and thankfully, like I say, it was a bit of a stinker of a game. The 2 opponents there, not particularly strong. So it's my little story about the clocks going back. Right, predictions. I don't really know what to think about this game, Robbie, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I just think Russ is going to be too much for that defense, and I think we will find a way to stop the run. I think Kyler's going to put up some yards on us. I think Hopkins is going to have a good day, but I really think this is another game that we're going to pull out. It's going to be close, and I think people are going to be like, having a heart attack towards the end of the game, but it's going to be a close one. Prediction for score, I'll go 34-31 Seahawks.
I really don't know what to think about this game at all. As I mentioned, I just, on the one hand, I could see a win similar to the game last year in Arizona. I could see that. If Kyle Murray is battling something, and if they kind of have a formula in order to contain him, and I think sometimes when you have a bit of a laugher, which is what Arizona had in Dallas, basically just waltzed in. I mean, a couple of the players could have had a beer during that game. It was so easy. I mean, when you have a game like that, it can sort of give you greater confidence than maybe is warranted. It can give you a false sense of security. I don't know if that's best for them, as opposed to coming in like the Vikings did, feeling like we need to win this game or our season's practically done. Instead, Arizona might be feeling a bit good about it, but at the same time, it's just, I don't know. I kind of feel like the Seahawks are 5-0, Robbie, but they probably should be 4-1 or maybe even 3-2. That they've kind of rode the luck a little bit, and eventually maybe that luck is gonna go by the wayside. And Duke Hopkins is just, and Kenyon Drake. I don't know. I don't know. Part of me
give us a prediction. Come on, what are you giving?
Part of me thinks that maybe I should go against you to try and get level on the overall. So I hate to do it, and I'm no doubt going to get some furious abuse for this, but I'm going to go Arizona 23, Seattle 20, and I'm going to say that they nick it with a late field goal, and I think maybe Myers will miss one for Seattle.
All right. Well, I'm going to be one of those guys. I'm going to get on your blog and I'm going to boo you for this one.
I'm used to it. I'm imagining the emails coming in as we speak. I hope I'm wrong. You know, I really, really don't want to be right. And it's a funny stretch because I thought the Niners were going to be picking in the top 10 last week, and then they go and destroy the Rams. So it goes to show that I am wrong fairly frequently. So I hope I am on this occasion as well. Right, Robbie, appreciate your time. Always good views, good conversation there. Let us know what you think about the podcast. Give us a thought on Antonio Brown and the Arizona Cardinals game in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share. Head over to SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis, and we'll speak to you after the game.